Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for this time of reflection on the seven last words of Jesus from the cross. Wherever you are watching from today, I invite you to pause, quiet your heart, and focus on Christ and his suffering for us. The seven last words are the final sayings of Jesus recorded across the four Gospels while he was on the cross. No single Gospel contains all seven, but together they give us a powerful and deeply personal picture of our Savior in his final hours. In these words, we see his mercy, his love, his suffering, his obedience, his victory, and his complete trust in the Father. As we listen to each word, we are not only remembering the death of Jesus as a historical event, we are also hearing the heart of Christ. These final sayings are full of meaning for our faith and for our lives today. They remind us that the cross is the place where sin is confronted, grace is revealed, love is displayed, and salvation is accomplished. So, as we begin, let us come with humility, gratitude, and reverence. Let us listen carefully to the words of Jesus, and let us ask the Lord to open our hearts so that we may not only understand the message of the cross, but also be changed by it. So today we are looking at the first word of Jesus from the cross. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Luke chapter 23, verse 34. These are not small words. These are not ordinary words. Jesus speaks them while hanging on the cross. He has been falsely accused, beaten, mocked, rejected, and nailed to the cross. He is suffering physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And yet, the first thing he says is not a curse. It is not revenge. It is not anger. It is a prayer. He says, Father, forgive them. That tells us something very important about Jesus. Even in his deepest suffering, his heart is still full of mercy. Even when people are hurting him, he is praying for them. Even when others are acting in cruelty, he responds in grace. Think about how unusual that is. Most of us, if we are hurt badly, immediately think about defending ourselves. If someone speaks against us, mistreats us, or wants us deeply, our natural reaction is often anger, pain, or bitterness. We may replay the situation in our minds. We may think, why did they do that to me? Or I hope they understand how much they hurt me. But Jesus, in the middle of the greatest injustice ever committed, says, Father, forgive them. This is not because what they were doing was acceptable. It was not. Their actions were sinful. Crucifying the Son of God was not a small matter. But Jesus says they do not know what they are doing. In other words, they do not fully understand the depth of what is happening. They do not fully realize the seriousness of their sin. Yet, even in that moment, Jesus asks the Father to show mercy. That is the gospel. The gospel begins with grace. Before we ever love God, He loved us. Before we ever turn to Him, Christ was already moving toward sinners in mercy. At the cross, we see that clearly. Let me give a simple example. Imagine a child who says something hurtful to a parent in anger. The child may not fully understand the weight of those words. The words still hurt, but a loving parent may see that the child is acting out of immaturity, confusion, or pain. That does not remove the wrong, but it may be shape the response. The parent may still correct, but also forgive. In a far greater and holier way, Jesus looks at those crucifying him and responds with mercy. There's another example we can think about in everyday life. Sometimes people hurt others because they themselves are blind, broken, or deeply lost. A person may speak harshly, act pridefully, or wound someone else, and part of the tragedy is that they do not even understand the damage they are causing. Again, that does not excuse sin, but it reminds us that people need grace, and Jesus shows us that grace. Now, the first word from the cross is not only about what Jesus did then, it is also about how we are called to live now. Jesus had earlier taught his followers to love their enemies and pray for those who persecuted them. On the cross, he practices exactly what he preached. That means forgiveness is not just a Christian idea, it is a Christian way of life. Let me be clear, forgiveness does not mean pretending evil is fine. It does not mean denying your pain. It does not mean there should never be boundaries, wisdom, or justice. But forgiveness does mean refusing to let hatred rule your heart. It means entrusting judgment to God and releasing the desire for revenge. For some of you watching today, this message may be very personal. Maybe someone has hurt you deeply. Maybe someone lied about you, betrayed you, rejected you, or caused a wound you still carry. And maybe when you hear the word forgiveness, it feels impossible. But the first word from the cross reminds us that forgiveness begins not in our strength, but in the grace of Christ. We forgive because we have been forgiven. And that leads to another important application. This word is not only for those who need to forgive, it is also for those who need forgiveness. When Jesus says, Father, forgive them, that includes the kind of people who nailed him there. That means no sinner is beyond the reach of grace. If Jesus can pray for his executioners, then there is a hope for us too. There's a hope for the guilty. There's a hope for the ashamed. There's a hope for the one who knows they have sinned against God. So, what do we do with this first word? First, we look at Jesus and worship Him. We see His mercy, His love, and His grace. Second, we receive His forgiveness personally. We stop pretending we are strong enough or good enough on our own, and we come to Him honestly. Third, we ask God to help us forgive others. Maybe not all at once, maybe not in a shallow way, but truly, sincerely, and prayerfully. The cross begins with a prayer of mercy. That is how Jesus opens his suffering. And that is how he opens the door of hope for us. So today, let us remember this. The first word from the cross is a word of forgiveness. And if Christ speaks forgiveness from the cross, then there is a mercy enough for us and grace enough to shape how we live.